Okay, the Havre Grace Planning Commission meeting for February 20th, 2025 will now come to order. And I'll start by calling the roll. Chair Volney Ford is present. Ed Garono.
Present.
Warren Hartenstein is not present. Farhat Shah is not present, and she notified us yesterday that she would not be able to attend. Chip Place?
Here.
Janice Chan notified me today that she has a virus and is pretty deeply involved with it, and so she could not make it. And Councilwoman Tammy Schneggers is not here yet. I understand that she is supposed to be here, so we'll note that when she does walk in. And Harry Miller.
Here.
We have 4 present. We have a quorum, and Mr. Miller is going to be acting as a regular member tonight, a voting member. He is our alternate for just such situations as this. So we have 4 voting members here, and we can proceed. Now, even though the agenda that was put out shows the last item, item E, as being under new business as being the last item, it has to be the first item. Here comes Debbie. You are present.
I am.
And so the ordinance requires the Planning Commission at its very first piece of business at the beginning of each year is to hold an election for its leadership. And so we must move that to the front of the agenda even before we can consider old business. So we have to, for this coming year, we have to elect a chair and a vice chair. And what's your preference?
Even though I just arrived, I'm recommending that we hold off until, move that to the end in case any other members come in.
Well, nobody else is coming.
That's it.
That's it, yeah.
It doesn't look as if we have a quorum.
We do. We have 5. We only need 4.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
All righty then.
All right. So now let's hear a motion to nominate somebody.
I move that we nominate officers for the chair and vice chair for the 2025 calendar year.
I need you to turn on your microphone.
Sorry.
Okay, then the motion would be to nominate who?
Let me repeat.
Yeah.
I move that the commission nominate for the 2025 calendar year chairperson and vice chairperson.
Okay, but I mean, we need a name. We need.
Oh, you want to go?
Yeah, I need you to nominate somebody.
Well, then I probably shouldn't do it. I guess.
You can't do yourself, but you can do anybody else.
Well, I would nominate Volney Ford for chairperson.
Any other nominations?
I'll second that.
All right. So let's just, I guess we'll vote them separately. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor of that nomination? Please, I think I have to call a roll. Ed Garono?
Yes.
Chip Place?
Yes.
Tammy Schneggers?
Yes.
Harry Miller?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you. Thank you for your confidence. Now, do I hear a nomination for vice chair?
Sorry.
I move to nominate Ed Carano as vice chair.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion on that motion or any other nominations? All right, I'll call the roll again. Start with Harry Miller,
Yes.
Tammy Schneggers,
Yes.
Chip Place,
Yes.
Volney Ford, yes, and you can vote for yourself. Ed?
Yes.
All right, congratulations, and thank you for your confidence in Ed. Wait a minute.
You two have done a fine job this last year. Thank you for carrying us forward.
Got loose doors falling on my feet down here. Okay, now we can do business. Okay, the first item on the agenda is old business, and it's a review and adoption of proposed rules and procedures for the Planning Commission. Now, you've got a copy of those rules and procedures. The last draft copy, we actually acted on right around October 14th, or a few days thereafter. And as I recall, we approved that draft to be sent to the city, because I think they wanted to run it by the city attorney, and I believe the city council has to approve these rules and procedures. I can't remember, but anyway, the process was advanced beyond our hands, and I have not heard anything back since then. Eric, do you have anything to add to this? It's my...
No, so you made a motion to recommend that city attorney review this and provide any comments. I know there were comments and suggestions that were made to the city attorney that you wanted her to address and provide feedback on. We are now understand that there's been some additional changes to Chapter 25 that would ultimately, you would need to revise the rules and procedures that you currently have. So.
Oh, wait a minute, we don't have rules and procedures currently.
No, you don't. The Board
This
of
is the
Appeals
first time
does.
because the city determined that the state
Yeah, yeah,
wanted us to have rules and procedures, so we wrote this for the first time.
yeah. So you have an option to move forward as you see wish. You can make a motion to untable it, bring it on and discuss it, or keep it on as old business until a later date and time.
Okay, well, it's also my understanding that the city attorney has not yet had time to go through this.
I haven't heard back.
I mean, that's what I understand, so.
Okay.
So, we can just leave that tabled? And we'll have to.
Yeah, you would. I mean, it's an old business, so I mean, you can untable it. Or
I'm
if
sorry?
you want to continue to discuss it.
I'm not understanding you. What did you say?
Do you want to continue to discuss the rules of procedure?
I think we're done discussing it. We've sent it up. We don't have anything else to add to it.
Why can't we move forward and refer it to the city attorney?
Well, we did refer it through the proper channels.
Okay.
And we can't do any more with it. And we're waiting for it to come back from proper channels.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't actually recall that we recommended this to the city attorney. I think we had some questions for the city attorney, and I don't know that we've received answers on that.
I don't recall.
Okay. I know I had one question, which I've actually
I remember your question, yeah.
well, my question was basically about ex parte communications with applicants. And I've since done my own research and looked at the State Department of Planning, and they do have such recommendations.
Good.
And cited other, other cities and other localities that have similar rules. And especially if you do happen to have ex parte communications accidentally or whatever, that you should disclose those. If you've been reached out to by a party, you should disclose those communications, which I think are important. And the one concern that I would still have on that, though, is I do think it's important to engage, get as much information as possible. And sometimes just in these meetings, you know, it's very, very, sources of information are fairly closed. You have drawings that are submitted, but what I found is, and I mentioned this before, and I'll mention it again, it didn't go over the first time, but I'll mention it again in that, one, I think it's very important before we meet as a group that and we are allowed to go out into the field and make measurements and investigate the site. It would be super helpful if the applicant were required to stake out the center line of a road in a subdivision application and to delineate the limits of disturbance out in the field. Because it's very hard to take the drawings that we receive from an applicant and then try to interpret that in the field, exactly what's what and where various things are.
Well, that would be a required step in their subdivision process,
Yeah.
development process. That would not be something that would be in our rules and procedures.
Okay.
But it would be something that the planning department would have to add to their list of things.
Yeah, add to the checklist, maybe, perhaps. And then I would still think, what didn't go over so well last time, it would be very helpful also if the applicant, or more importantly, their engineer, were in the field at a designated time when the commission can go out and the public can go out and see the site for themselves and then ask any questions of the engineer in the field. And I use the example of the Decoy Museum when I happened to go out that evening before our meeting, and their engineer happened to be there also.
Right.
And so I was able to ask them, where exactly is this building line coming out? And that was very helpful. So if we could institute those two processes one way or the other, I would highly recommend
Well,
that.
the city attorney went back and reviewed. I had a long conversation with her about our rules and procedures. One day, it was just the two of us, and I was up in her office on another matter, and we sat down at the conference table and talked about it. And she, first of all, told me that she had so many other things thrown at her that she just had not had time to really get into this like she should.
Right.
And so, but she did tell me that she had reviewed that planning commission meeting that we had, and she had listened to your comments, and that she was given those comments thought, how to weave it in. Of course, if we all go out in the field and meet with anybody that's involved with the applicant, we, in essence, are having a planning commission meeting.
Right.
And then that sets off all kinds of other little Roman candles that light up the landscape that we have to adhere to and all those kind of things.
You'd have to post notice.
All that stuff. And so it's the question, we've just got to give that a lot of thought. Do we need to go through that exercise and also have a meeting time that's suitable to everybody, which more than likely to be in the middle of the day when most of us have jobs. And
Or on the
that
weekend.
gets a little ticklish as well. So
Okay.
I think that at this point in the game, as I see it, we've just got to let the city attorney finish
Okay.
doing her job, and it'll come back to us.
All right. Well, if she's considering the two things I just mentioned tonight, that would be
She
great.
told me she was.
Okay, great.
So, look, I don't want to belabor this too much or piggyback, and I'm not like here for dirty laundry or nothing either, but, we would even need the time to do what he's saying, and Tuesday to Thursday isn't enough time. You just happen to be going by the Decoy Museum,
Yeah.
on Wednesday night, but, this has been ongoing. I've always asked about this, and I know I'd like this stuff earlier,
Right.
okay? Like a week in advance, so I can spend the due diligence to go through it. That's all. And that's not a slam. I know sometimes it can't happen that way, and sometimes, whatever, but
That's a good point, Harry.
Your point's well taken, and we've discussed that with the department on several occasions. But I think there's some new energy in the department right now, and I think we can maybe get some of these things, these procedures, sharpened up a little bit. And so, and I could probably just take this moment to announce that Mr. Borsier is no longer with the city, as you all know. And Tammy, can you tell us about our new arrangement until we finally get a permanent director of the Department of Planning?
Certainly. Thank you, Volney, our chair, rising again. Currently, we have a former person that has worked with the city planning department named Ben Marziano. He is filling in as acting director of planning, and they are working towards hiring someone new. He is only on for a portion of the time. He doesn't attend the meetings like last night. There's certain, he's retired, so he has stepped in to fill in, to help out, and to make sure that we have that transition so that we can hire someone. There are some interested applicants, so we're going forward with that and hoping for the best. Because, even though, through the dips and valleys, we have Eric hanging on, and I appreciate that so much. Thank you. And Diane Claire, who just stepped out momentarily, but, and our planning commission, we're just trying to hold it together and, just work together as a team to make sure that we have the right person coming in and helping us continue to go forward in our mission.
Thank you. And
You're welcome.
I think the city did the right thing with that interim hire, if you will, or position. It's going to make a big difference, really, because this department is a handful to run.
Yes,
So
indeed.
much going on. Yeah. Okay, so we're really not bringing this back off the table. We just discussed it. We're not bringing it off the table for any action. So with your consent, we'll just leave it tabled.
Okay.
Until further notice. Okay. All righty. Let's see, takes care of that. And then I go to the comprehensive plan resolution and the status of the comprehensive plan. And Diane, Claire, would you like to come up and bring us up to speed on that?
Sure thing. Good evening. Good to see everybody again. I'm coming before you once again for the 2024 Envision Havre Grace Comprehensive Plan. It is necessary to forward it through a formal resolution, which you have in front of you, and I provided in the packet of information in advance. The letter that was sent, the October 17th, 2024 meeting, and describing your vote was not sufficient as per the land use article. That was my mistake. However, it gave council more time to review the 350-page document more fully. I'm here now asking you, as the Planning Commission, to vote on the resolution tonight, which formally sends it to the City Council as a legislative body, and I apologize for the delay. The resolution before you is modeled off the City Council resolution that was put before the City Council at their June 6th, 2025 meeting. The 2024 Envision Havre Grace Comprehensive Plan document is the same as the one in October. If you wish to see the chapters or refresh your memory, we worked on it for a number of, for a nice length of time. It is online on the Havre Grace government website under the Planning Department with a heading of the 2024 Envision Havre Grace Comprehensive Plan for City Council adoption. The 13 chapters and supporting resources are broken up into individual links. If you wish to see the document scanned in full, it is attached to the City Council meeting agenda for that January 6th, 2025 meeting, when it was introduced, discussed by council, and remanded back. It is my understanding that council members may have amendments, and I believe Eric placed a list of the proposed changes in the Google file for you to read. Those are just a smattering of some of the adjustments maybe. Those were largely focused on housing density references, but also include historic preservation design guidelines. There may be other changes that they will offer. Just so you are aware, the City Council is holding a public work session on the comprehensive plan and the fee schedule on Wednesday, February 26th at 6 o'clock p.m. at the Star Center. That's just next week over at the Star Center. I believe the comprehensive plan is the first item on the agenda for them to have as part of their work session discussion. A work session, it's my understanding, is open to the public, but I do not believe that the public can comment at that time. So thanks again for your time tonight. I'm hoping you will vote on this so we can forward it and put it to rest. And truly, it's great to see everybody again. So,
Thank you.
yeah, no worries. Thank you.
So everybody understands what we're really doing is we're, in a more formal way, we're doing the exact same thing that we voted on back in the fall.
Correct,
And, because nothing's changed since then.
correct.
And so why don't we just, and we're going to date it today?
I'm sorry.
We will date it today and not last fall? We're not going to,
Yes.
Chair, Mr. Chair, I have a question.
yes.
So did he or did he not make the changes?
No. Those have not been, the document that stands is the document that stands from October 17th.
Understood, thank you.
So those are just amendments or deletions that are,
I thought you said that Mr. Lawrence made the corrections, so.
no.
Okay.
No,
thank
no,
you.
no,
I
not
appreciate
yet.
the clarification.
So essentially what we're doing is a little piece of housekeeping. We are basically formalizing the very thing that we, the action that we took back in October,
Correct.
just because it is required that that be sent up as a resolution
Yes.
and not just as a letter of introduction. So, everybody understands what we're doing here, and of course, we're not shortcutting the process. We're just,
Yes,
we're just switching one letter for another.
this forwards it more
Yeah.
formally, and this meets the letter of the land use article.
So, I would like to hear a motion and hopefully a second that the chair be authorized to sign this resolution that you have before you, introducing the comprehensive plan to the city council.
I so move.
I would second.
All right? Any discussion on that? Now, let me just move. Hold on a second. I'll call the roll.
One moment, please.
I'm sorry, any discussion on the matter? No.
Discussion. As a council member, I would like to recuse myself from this vote as I am involved with discussions that are presented to the council. And as a planning commissioner, I've been actively involved for the last couple years. And I just would like to be removed from this vote, as I know it's going to be coming before the public hearing and as a vote to the council in the end. So I would love to hear what you all have to say.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
at this, thank you. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I would just note, I went back and looked at the land use code myself, and there could be a couple of additional steps after the city council receives this formal resolution.
We know that.
They could remand it back to the planning commission with some of these suggestions, at which point we would have to hold another public hearing.
That's right.
If we were to adopt, or they could, I believe the city council could just make changes on its own.
Correct.
So,
That's the way I understand it.
right, okay, just wanted to,
And so we're not exactly off the hook. We may be continuing to
Right.
take some actions on this.
right.
My hope is that it would move forward, and I believe this starts a 90-day clock.
Right.
So,
And if no action is taken by city council, either to remand or it's
then
approved.
then it becomes automatically approved.
Right.
Ready for roll call? Okay. Let's start with Harry Miller.
Yes.
Chip Place.
Yes.
Ed Garono.
Yes.
And Chair Volney Ford votes yes. And it takes 4 to make the quorum, and I will sign this document before I leave tonight.
Thank you very much.
All right.
And thank you, Diane.
Much appreciated. Appreciate you guys acting on this so quickly. Thank you.
Okay, we move to the next item on the agenda, which is the group housing definitions. And I assume that a lot of the folks that are attending tonight are here for that reason. Is that correct? Uh-huh. This is kind of a complicated issue.
Yeah.
And the city attorney has sent a memorandum to the mayor and council. And you have a copy of that in front of you. And then there's discussions of the ordinance and so forth and so on. As I say, it appears that the problem we have with the RO district is trying to fit in the things that we were trying to fit into it without coming into conflict with the rest of the district or creating problems that would basically change the entire complexion of the entire district in a much greater way than just what we were trying to do at that last meeting. I don't know who to start with here. You sponsored this. Do you want to say anything to begin with?
I would like to put it into record that it was not sponsored by me.
Oh.
It was taken on by Councilmember Jason Robertson.
Oh, okay.
Being a part of the planning committee, which includes 3 council members, Vicki Jones, Jason Robertson, and myself, Tammy Lynn Shenagus. I did not sponsor it. I got the group together
Stand
to,
corrected.
I just want to clarify because I feel it's a very complicated issue and it's very layered in what's happening here. We have to be very careful and to step lightly. I am not pushing any agenda, and I want to make sure that everyone knows and understands that there's a lot going on. And it was put on my plate as the chair of the planning committee, which includes us 3. I gathered together a group of people to meet at the proposed property of Mount Zion for the veteran housing. And I know that everyone understands that that's why we have this change in zoning being proposed. And I got together all of the stakeholders, the owners of the property, Mount Zion Church, the people that wanted to sell, the CHEP Foundation that wanted to gather together to form the possible housing, and a few council members, as well as the Historic Preservation Society. We came together as a group to see what was going on. So it is very layered, and I am involved as a council member, as a community member, and as a planning commissioner and planning committee chair. So, but I'm not proposing it to go forward as it, I handed it off to Jason Robertson, as he is actively involved with the veterans. He works with the Veterans Association, and I felt that it would be best for him to be able to take on that lead in this challenging opportunity to change our zoning for one opportunity to help our veterans. So, with that said, audience, it's a lot. And if we change one, we have a list of A through M of housing that we need to define so that we're not stepping over any boundaries of zoning that affects, zoning of, housing, zoning of businesses that are, in the residential district. So we have a lot to consider. That's why it's taking so long, because if you say yes to one, you have to say yes to all. So we have to tread lightly and make sure that we are setting a precedence that's going to be conducive to our zoning districts. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, commissioners, you've all had a chance to read these several documents that pertain to this issue. And to the extent that you have been able to digest these documents and that you understand these documents, I think at this time I would like to just hear from each of you on what your take is on the situation. Who wants to start? Chip, you look like a guy who would like to start.
I'll start.
All right.
All right. It is very complicated. And I think, to start with, I think we made this, or as it was presented to us, it was more complicated than it needed to be. And it's complicated enough. So we started out by trying to redefine all these different housing types, which were, none of that was particularly relevant to the issue at hand. The issue at hand is, how do you handle group housing for people, let's just say generic, people with disabilities. And then we try to get into defining dormitories and, group living with assisted living, community residential facility, rooming house, dormitory, fraternity and sorority houses, hospice, nursing home. None of that had anything to do with anything,
Right.
in particular. The one part of our code that it was relevant was the community residential facility. And that's already identified in our code as a potential allowable use. And though not in the RO district. And then we tried to address that particular definition, which is really where the focus should have been in the first place. And I'll read what we had described then. It's any licensed facility containing living units, and that was added by us, certified or authorized by state, federal, or local authorities as a residence, for example, but not limited to children or adults with physical, developmental, or mental disabilities, dependent children, or elderly residents in need of supervision, support, and/or independent living training. And then we added, and transitional housing for veterans and first responders. And does not include halfway house, crisis residential center, or secure community transition facility. May include specialized home for developmentally disabled, group care facility for children, and boarding home. So I think that's what the focus of this really was, and what it should have been, and not get into all these other definitions of housing types. So then the city attorney pointed out confusion by trying to, again, define group living, and she referred us to the state statute, which defines group homes. And I'll go through that real quick for the benefit of everybody. There's a state statute, the code of the state register, section 10.21.04.02. And this is a definition of group home. And one, a group home means a community-based residential program that provides services for A, for individuals who have been or under treatment for a mental disorder, or B, when possible, in the individual's community of origin, and C, in a home-like environment. A group home means a private group home as defined in this Maryland statute, a small private group home which admits 4 but not more than 8 individuals and is deemed conclusively a single-family residence and is permitted in all residential zones. So this is what the city attorney was saying at one of the city council meetings, that a small group home is allowed as of right in any residential zone anywhere in the state. And that's up to 4, at least 4, but not more than 8 individuals. Then you have a large private group home, B, under these regulations, admits at least 9, but not more than 16 individuals. And subsection 2 is deemed conclusively a multifamily residence and is permitted in zones of similar density. So that means, again, as of right, in any multifamily zone in Havre de Grace or any other city, you can have a large group home. And group home does not include a foster home that is the domicile of the foster parent or a facility that is, 1, owned or leased by the state or any public agency, 2, regulated by the Department of Juvenile Services or Developmental Disabilities, or organized wholly or partly to make a profit. So I don't think any of those are applicable to what we've been talking about. So the RO district allows single family, so it could, a small group home, 4 to 8 people is allowed in the RO district. The larger group home is not allowed, but it is allowed, for instance, in the RB zone, which allows for multifamily. So Mount Zion, if we're talking about that site in particular in the RO zone, a large group home is not permitted, but a small one is. And so then to allow that, the larger group home or something larger, and it's not clear what a larger, more than 16 is under the state health law, you'd have to change the zoning at least to allow multifamily. And if you do that, then you allow large group homes in the RO in addition to the RB zone. And the city attorney kind of raised the issue, well, if you allow a large group home, or if you go back to, our definition of, what was I saying? The community residential facility, which kind of overlaps. She was suggesting it opens the door to multifamily throughout the RO zone. I'm not sure that I follow that. I think you could tailor something that's more specific, but we'd have to do something to allow Mount Zion to have more than 8 people in the home. I'm not trying to comment one way or the other on Mount Zion. I'm trying to explain where I think the field of play is here. And I would just mention the other way to handle, if the city chose to allow this, a similar use or a larger group home or the community residential facility in the RO district, we talked about making the hospital site itself a smaller overlay district, and it might be possible to make a smaller district that could include such a use that was not fully the RO district, but something smaller related to the hospital site itself. And, if you have to think, if the hospital site were to become multifamily, as we discussed throughout that whole planning process, that could also allow the hospital site to accommodate a large group home. So, yes, complicated, but...
But their whole plan is built around this particular site.
I know.
And which is not the hospital site.
Yes, and let me, let me add just one other wrinkle. There already is a group home in the RO district. So I think it would be good to know how that group home was approved and whether that's a non-conforming use. Because it's actively happening there. It's the National Law Foundation First Responders. It's on Girard and Union. And there's, apparently it's very well run, but how does that, it would be good to know how that occurred. And I don't know if anybody knows about that. The council member has her hand up.
The reason I want to speak is because I want to backpedal a bit to what you're having to say about the original intent of the reason why we came together with this is specifically because of the home wanting to be multi-use in an RO district. It was not on the table at all where the first responders home, which you're speaking of right now, it was not on the list. It was added later after our former director of planning went and visited the home.
Right.
Okay, this home that you speak of is run by a state, is a lockdown facility, and it has been in place for quite a few years. I don't know all the details of when and how it came into play, but it is a separate entity, and it's not on the table for this, okay, as well as the hospital. So we need to make sure that we, understand that the steps that caused our legal counsel to get involved is because of the change in the original plan which came forward to council. And that's why, it's getting convoluted. We're adding more situations that don't exist to the Mount Zion property that's trying to change this entire, ordinance. So we've got to think about it.
So at the last meeting that we weighed in on this project and on this matter, as I recall, we had our positive hat on, and we were trying to figure out a proper way to accommodate this, to make this happen. And as I recall, we sent up recommendations to mayor and council that were mostly supportive of this, but it hadn't gone in front of the city attorney yet, and some of the other problems that this set off were not apparent to us at the time.
I just want to say that I was unable to attend that meeting
Yeah.
due to the passing of my mother, so
Yeah.
I wasn't able to weigh in on my insights into the situation. So it's hard for me to say, exactly that I was a part of the discussion,
No,
but
I
I
wasn't
do
inferring
know
that. Yeah.
that all the council members are definitely concerned that we are making the right decisions. That's why we're not like, pass it through, pass it through. We want to do what's right because this is going to affect a great deal
Yeah.
of other entities that fall within this district and this code. So we need to be very careful and make sure that we're, looking at the facts, listening to our city attorney, and as recommended to our city attorney, if we as a planning commission want to look at other jurisdictions that have these types of housing in their community, what are they doing, and how can, we define this to fit our community, or does it not fit for our community? So
When you say other communities, you mean other towns?
other towns,
Yeah, yeah.
Aberdeen, Perryville, I mean, it's different counties, but they are surrounding communities, similar municipalities that may have the type of population and, district zoning that we have. So we are requested by the city attorney to just step back and take a look, take a few sections. We know that we're looking at group housing specifically, but if we're going to dive into it and change, we need to change it all to benefit everyone involved, or every aspect of the zoning code.
It sounds to me like the one thing that's going to have to take place then is a staff study, because, the commission itself doesn't have the resources to go out and conduct those studies. That's just not the way we're formed, so it's going to require, Eric, a staff study from the department of other options in order for us to be able to come to a final recommendation on this.
So what our attorney is encouraging is, like we did with the comprehensive plan, break down into groups and take a few minutes, have a little public work session or a time where we work as groups to look at that and decide hey, this is how we're aligned. This is what we do here in Havre de Grace. And just make sure that we take a little bit of time. It doesn't have to happen overnight, but we don't have to drag our feet either.
Okay.
Like we did with the comprehensive plan. That was a good, long process, and we, as planning commissioners, took time to look at sections, discuss them as a whole body, as well as small groups. So that's what's recommended if we want to make any changes going forward.
Okay, I'm just,
Well, sorry, I didn't mean to clear my throat to get attention, but but I was gonna make a further suggestion here. It would be good to know from the Mount Zion folks and from CHAPS how, I think the department has tried to frame this, but I don't think we've heard from, in terms of legislation. I'm not sure we've heard from CHAPS or the Mount Zion folks how they see themselves fitting in. Do they see themselves fitting in with the Department of Health, the State Department of Health definitions of group homes? Do they see themselves fitting in with the community residential facility definition that we have in town? And do they see that as a distinct definition, or their use as distinctly limited to that rather than applying, say to multifamily housing more broadly? Do they have a way of narrowing this down further for us?
well,
Because, in a way, I think the burden is on those folks to help define how they exactly see this fitting in, if the city wanted to pursue it.
Harry?
All right. I was here last time, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but there's no case in front of us, okay? And again, I'm a veteran, believe it's a good cause. I have to say that again, but we're not asked to review a case. We are asked to allow something in the RO district that's not currently in there. Okay, it's as simple as that. And that's why I was trying to break it down to last time. And I've read the city attorney's opinion, and I tend to agree with it. It was sort of like what I was trying to discuss last time, and I want to separate. If there's, and again, I asked this of Tim, and I guess he told me no, that they could make a case, and why can't they go to the Board of Appeals or something like that with their story and special exception and hardship, right? Without us, okay. No, go ahead. Please, no, if you got a good answer for that, I'm interested.
I do have a good answer because they went ahead and got the funding before they even came through the process of working with our city for any variances, for any zoning changes, and they were on a time frame and they were pushing the agenda. Bottom line.
And again, we're talking about a case that we're not asked to consider. We're asked, there's a good story why we're asked to maybe allow this in RO. And what we can see is through the good intentions of trying to help a good organization do a good thing, it causes this landslide of other things that need to be addressed because of it. And going to what you said, it is a very slippery slope that requires a lot more thought than good intentions. And that's all I got to say about it, I think.
Well, it seems to me at this point, the city attorney has raised a number of conflicting issues, if you want to call them that, a number of concerns about, by going forward with this thing, what it's going to force the city to have to do in so many ways that the city may or may not be prepared to do or sees that it can't do without damaging other initiatives in that district. And because these issues have been raised, there will certainly be more questions that we have of the applicant. As you were just mentioning, there's some more information that we will need, right?
I'm not aware of an applicant.
Well, the people that came to us the last time and spoke to this issue.
Understood.
Well, yeah. Let me just add, though, too, there would be multiple steps to this process. And Harry, you are absolutely correct. There is no application before us. There's basically
I stand corrected, yeah, that's true.
there's basically a rezoning request. And so, and it's a rezoning for use that's not permitted in the RO district. I mean, it could be, as of right, in other districts in the city, but it's not permitted in the RO district. So there's a question in terms of rezoning is, do you allow either a group home as defined in, under the Maryland Code, or some other similar use that's in the RO district? And then if it were allowed, then there's the whole process of, there's site plan approval. Well, it might be a special use permit, and then you'd have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And then there's a site plan approval process too, where, you know, and this is where issues where folks have raised, oh, there's parking issues, there's other issues. That's where those kind of issues are more fully addressed. But yeah, this is basically a rezoning question, allowing a use in the RO district that's not currently allowed.
So, okay.
Yes.
It would seem to me that between the legal department and the planning department, they should be able to say what the law allows or doesn't allow. I don't think that's our position to determine that. So, if it may be our position to determine if a change in the code is warranted or not, and that would be something that would be proposed, I would assume, by either the administration or someone to propose a change in the code to allow something, and that may come to us. But it would seem to me that between the law department and the planning department, that they need to get together and see what goes here.
That's kind of where I was headed when I was, you know, but while you all were talking. This thing is not ripe for consideration by the Planning Commission because we have nothing concrete to look at. We've just been simply asked to weigh in with more opinion, and our opinion at this stage of the game would not be an informed opinion because we're not lawyers. And, you know, we're not charged with delving into the impact from a legal standpoint of what it would take to make this happen. Number one, and number two, we're not a department that can conduct studies. So it's going to, and the planning department would have to look at the other communities, which was recommended by the city attorney. And I also think that the planning department probably needs to have a more in-depth discussion. I used the wrong term a while ago when I said applicant of the interest group. Let's call you folks that. The ones that came before us the last time to ask for our opinion on what you were trying to do. And I think there needs to be some more specific information drawn from the folks that are sitting here about this project in great detail, because any change in that ordinance is going to have to be spelled out in great detail. And if you're going to go to all that trouble, one had better meet the needs of the other, you know. So I don't mean to be kicking the can down the road, but it's just really, we don't have anything, as Mr. Miller was saying, as you were saying, we don't have anything concrete to chew on right now. And whatever we did come up with would be completely ill-informed. And it would sort of like we'd be wasting our time at this stage of the game. Do you all agree with that?
Well, I would disagree slightly, Mr. Chairman, because we do have something in front of us. There was this proposed ordinance that we were given. And as I said, you know, it goes through a lot of different categories of
Way too many.
way too many. And then, so what I took from the city attorney's comments were, well, you have to go back now and define all these things, like dormitories and rooming houses, and check other ordinances around us and provide definitions for all that. To me, that's all irrelevant. I think the only issue, I think we need to narrow it down to actually be very clear on what the definition of a community residential facility is, because that is a definition that's already in our code, and we provided a couple of edits to make it more narrow than it is already, or that would at least cover transitional housing for veterans and first responders, and narrow it down that way, so we have a very specific thing that's before the city council to say, well, this is a use that is identified in our code, it's defined in our code. Do we want to apply this to the RO district? And I think maybe this, you know, if the city attorney wants to opine on that further, or if the planning department can look at other towns that have similar definitions, I think that's the most relevant consideration at this point. And then decide whether that should be applied to the RO district or not.
Sounds reasonable, yes.
Could you please point out where the community residential facility is located in the documents?
It's located in our zoning code
Okay.
under definitions. The zoning code is, the definitions are section 205-13. And if you go get down to the Cs, there's actually two different type of, there's a community residential facility, which I think we were thought might apply to this particular rezoning. There's also a community treatment facility, which we did not necessarily think would apply. So, you know, or it might, but those are the two really that are relevant here, I think. And I think we can just, you know, forget about dormitories and everything else. And make sure we're very clear on what those definitions are. Look to other towns to see if there's a better definition. See how those jive with the state statutes. And just be very clear then on what the options are. And then City Council will be in a better position to decide whether this should apply to the RO district or a more limited district if we decided to do a hospital overlay district that included multifamily uses and or this type of facility.
Thank you for clarifying. I just wanted to make sure that that was the change that was made after the first installation of this ordinance. That was added additionally.
Right.
So, and it wasn't until November 21st that that information was presented.
Right.
So, right now, I think that it's, you know, not solid in our zoning code, and it's also, you know, shouldn't be considered a part of our hospital discussion. So we need to keep this situation separated.
I don't know. I think we're here to plan.
No,
We need
we're
to-
talking about this one topic. So I just want to make sure that we understand that they're not together. They are separate.
I don't necessarily agree with that.
Well, I understand you're not going to agree with what I have to say, and we understand things differently. But I'm going to tell you that this was put in to the ordinance after it was first originally presented. So that's why I'm saying it is secondary information that was added, and it hasn't been voted on. So,
None of this.
I know, I want to make it clear.
No, and this was part of our discussion. This was
And I was
part of our
not available
discussion
for the discussion, so
when-
that's why I want to that's why I'm clarifying, and that's why I'm also letting the audience that's here know that this was added after the fact, that this, ordinance 168 was first initially read into the documentation on council. This was added later. So we have to be very careful. We don't want to overstep and overspeak and talk about adding anything. We got to stay focused just on this one topic, because if we open it broad scam, we're going to get into that slippery slope.
Well,
So-
Councilmember, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm trying to focus it on what specifically we're talking about here. And we're talking about a community residential facility that's already defined under our code. And rather than talk about dormitories and other things, I'm suggesting we focus this discussion much more closely on that and how it relates to the state's regulations, and see how we might want to apply that to the RO district.
All right, I'm just clarifying that it hasn't been put into an ordinance and into the code as of yet.
All right, well, I think we can move on. But that's what I'm suggesting.
Okay, let's get a recommendation for what's next. Chip, would you like to recommend how we proceed?
Yes, I would recommend that we ask the planning department and the city attorney to re-examine the community residential facility definition as we had recommended back when we first discussed this, and was presented as a further clarification of the ordinance, and focus on that rather than the other definitions of residential facilities that are identified in the broader ordinance proposal.
So you're proposing that we request the planning department to do the study
Right.
and to...
Right, and look at other, as suggested by the city, look at other cities that if they have
And incorporate those findings with the city attorney's concerns.
yes, other types of definitions for
And then
those
bring
kind of
back
facilities.
a very specific,
Right, a review of others
of action.
towns that have addressed this type of facility, and provide better clarity on definitions to include in a potential rezoning ordinance, yes.
would you like to call that a motion?
Sure.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion on that motion?
I'm not sure I understood it. And, the discussion I'd have is, and no disrespect, I'm sorry, that was a lot. The deal is that, in the memo from the city attorney, it's advising the council two things, okay? Careful reconsideration of the definition that we sent to them, apparently. And it says that, at a minimum, the planning commission should be instructed to recommend definitions proposed for the terms above. That's what the city attorney's recommending. So, I'm agreeing with a part that there's got to be a simpler way to get to where we need to go. And I don't know if that's, it needs another look. Because, we did do a definition. We tried to work this community residential facility definition to make it palatable to be acceptable in the RO code. And the attorney's telling us it's not working. So
They need to tell us what does work.
she kind of did, and that was like redefine everything, and this is a bigger animal than tonight,
Yeah,
in my opinion.
I think that's what I'm trying to say. It got to be more complicated than it needed to be. We don't,
I tend to agree with
we
that,
don't, we don't need to
perhaps.
be talk about what's the definition of a fraternity or a dormitory.
But I'm not going to argue with the city attorney. They think that we do, and I'm not a lawyer, so just, so I'm not versed to do that. I'm just saying this good intention turned into an avalanche that's bigger than the 5 of us right here tonight. So, and this is just a discussion on here. This is just a discussion, so I don't know if we need to do anything except for we just discussed it.
Well, what I was asking for a motion on is what to say to the rest of the city. What should be the outcome of tonight's discussion? What steps should we take
Well,
based on what we've heard tonight?
and just as a matter of discussion, because I know there's a motion, that I also agree with you that I don't think right now we're prepared to sit down and start defining things. I mean, first of all, going back to what you said, again, I've been listening, that there is a process for that, and we could do that. It takes some time, so we'd have to set up some groups like you said, and this and that. But first of all, the easiest thing would be is to ask the state attorney to, the city attorney, to define what does comply with state law. You know what I mean? Because we want to make sure that we are in compliance with state law. So which ones don't? And then we can concentrate on those ones to look at, or the ones that are gray. If the other ones, we shouldn't have to define all of them. A bunch of these got to be defined correctly. So,
When the planning commission, as I've always understood it in all those years, when the planning commission is asked by the city council or by the city itself to weigh in on pending legislation, we best serve the council by looking at things from a certain perspective. And perspective number one is how are these changes going to affect the way we operate in the future when we have hearings? Is it going to be something that we can understand and work with, or is it going to be so complex that it's hard for us to make decisions in hearings, cases that are brought in front of us? We want it to make sense. And we've all experienced things over the years, and some things didn't make a lot of sense, and we didn't know quite how to handle it. And so that's our first consideration. And our second consideration is, does it make good planning sense to allow something to take place, to approve something? Is it from a planning perspective? Just purely from that, not a perspective of whether it meets a bunch of legal definitions or anything else. It's just, does it make good planning sense? Because those are the hats that we wear. And for us to sit here and try to wrestle with whether something is defined correctly from a legal standpoint in the ordinance, that's a little bit beyond our pay grade, it seems to be. And it also, we should not be delving into the political aspects of things. Does it make good political sense to do this or not do it? That's the city council's job. That's the elected official's job. And so I'm just trying to keep things within our wheelhouse is what I'm trying to do here. And I don't mean to be kicking a can down the road by any means, but we just are not statutorily equipped to deal with these issues that we're trying to wrestle with here.
Yeah, let me try one more time. I think we have a city code definition of, a community residential facility. And we suggested previously modifications to that definition. And we've been alerted by the city attorney that there's also state definitions for similar type uses. So I think our main goal here, and the main goal of the city with the help of the planning department and the city attorney's office, is to reconcile those two definitions and to see if they can be reconciled, or if we can have latitude to expand our definition beyond what, to cover a particular use that's maybe not strictly within the state statute. I think that's really, how to focus this. And then it becomes, once we reconcile those things and have a clear definition of what this type of facility is, then should that apply to the RO district? But there seems to be ambiguity or inconsistency maybe between the city code definition and what the state calls group homes. So we just need to go through a further exercise, I think, to reconcile those two.
So there's a motion on the floor in a second, and if it's approved, I'm prepared to write a letter to mayor and council expressing our concerns here and stating what we think should take place before we dig into this ordinance in greater detail. Is that the sense of your motion and second?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Motion and seconds on the floor. Any other discussion? Hearing. Yes?
I just really think that we need to consider what the community is saying and what is already in the zoning currently, and the fact that we have an outside agency trying to push us to change our zoning laws to accommodate them, and a building that wants to sell for $1.5 million so that they're free and clear. They're forcing us to make a decision, and I think we need to not be hasty and take some time, do a work group with April, not make decisions that are going to alter the course of our actions here in Havre Grace based on one entity that wants to come in and establish a well-intended, great, facility for people, but not necessarily in the right zoning district. So we need to be very cautious. This was sent to us, the Planning Commission, sent back because, there were some conflicts of interest at the meeting with the entity that wanted to be represented, the community, and the council. There wasn't a cohesive decision being made, so they wanted to take some time to give the community and our Planning Commission and our council some time to think. So basically, if you really want to take some time, go to the council meeting where everyone was there, the public, the people that live in the community, the homeowners, different businesses in the community, individuals that spoke under public comment, and the council members, as well as the CHAP representation that was there. It was filled with a lot of information. A lot was to be said. So I really think at this time, we're at discussion only, and we should continue it into a workshop instead of making a decision to go back to council with one definition. But I do understand what you're trying to say, and I do know that the information about the community residential facilities is recent, and it's not completely adopted into our code at this time. So that is my recommendation, and that's what I have to say about the discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Now, we've already heard from the interest group that wants to move ahead with this thing in a previous meeting. And tonight is not a public hearing. Tonight is we just have been asked by the department and the council to look at what's been submitted. And tonight we're not making a decision about anything regarding this project itself. I don't know that we need to hear from the public tonight because we'll be here all night unless somebody has a particular comment that they would like to make. We got 2, 3, 4. Okay, if we'll go that, but we're going to have to kind of keep it short and tight.
Like a council meeting, 3 minutes.
So if you would come up and give us your name and address.
Mr. Chip, Mr. Volney, Chairperson, Councilwoman Carrie Parsons on Seago Street. I was the one that actually provided the legislation on over to the city attorney. Part of what I, in my own personal viewpoint, not being an attorney, but reading the state statutes, was under our current code as defined, and the one not what's being proposed, but the one property that is currently in that area, that property already is licensed under that exemption that you had spoken of, sir. Okay, so under the Maryland Code 10.63, 02.3, but 04 goes into halfway houses. And the question that, and the thing that I brought up to April was this not being state licensed facility, but a private entity, not sanctioned through the state, a private entity. Would it fall in under halfway house? And that regulation was 10.63.02.04. So that is where you probably, I am assuming from the information that I provided her, is what is inside your memorandum. And when I went and I told her that by looking at our current statutes, let me try to bring that on up, I'm sorry. So ours with community residential facility, community treatment facility, those two were adopted back in 2010. Those were in Comar. Comar did change and the state codes changed a little bit, okay, because they're not, what they ended up doing with the community residential facility and treatment facility is they moved those two definitions under the licensing of Health and Human Services, and those have those exemptions because they're licensed, inspected, so on and so forth, through the state, not through a city, not through the county, but more of a state level. But what we're talking about with changing RO for one entity is not going to be state sanctioned. They're going to be a private, and that's what we should be looking at. If we open RO up, it'll most likely be private.
Okay.
That's
Thank
it.
you.
Sorry, but I'll give April the rest of the info that I talked about. Thank you, Mr. Volney.
Yes. Next. Sir, if you just give us your name and address.
Mike Warfield, 565 Lewis Street. We've heard a lot about the council, well, the council's position and the committee's position, but one of the groups that hasn't been mentioned enough is the citizenry. We live about 3 doors down from this facility, this proposed change. There's nobody I know that actually lives within a block that is in favor of this. So some property owners that might be in favor that on that block, but nobody that actually lives there is in favor of this. I just want you to take that into consideration, you know, the impact it has on the people that I can look out my window and look at that church. So anything that happens there is going to have a great impact on us. Some citizens may live blocks away, and it's not going to be such a big impact on them, but some citizens live right there. And that's the, you know, people we're concerned about. Thank you.
Here.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Over 200 Donneville Court, in Bully Rock. Second time here, heard a lot discussion about this right here. My only concern is we're talking about veterans who trained and fought for us to be safe, for our freedom, and now it seems like we can't, or some people can't do the same for them when they're in need. And that's what it's all about. I'm a retired homicide sergeant in Baltimore City, retired chief of police on the Eastern Shore, and I've seen situations where facilities will move in and not say anything. But now we have a facility coming in here with to want to house veterans, and some people have issues with that. We can get people coming in here, they don't have to tell us, with serious problems, and there's nothing we can do about it. At least we know that these people at one point was disciplined in the military, and they're here because they need us. So I would say not to turn our backs on them, because they didn't turn our backs on us. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that fact that you just spoke to, that it's all about the veterans, is the thing that was driving the positive side of our considerations at the last meeting and is still in our hearts tonight. I'm a veteran also, and I know exactly what it means. And yes, sir.
Good evening, Randy Barnes. I am a resident of Havre, 566 Lewis Street. I am a property owner. I do not live in my facility right now. I live at 834 North Juniata Street. Been in Havre all of my life. And it is the elephant in the room, and it should be in the conversation. And it's not a bad situation. The emergency first responders facility, that is a concern. It's a great facility. And as you go by and you see what's going on there, it's great for the community. And you want to take it out of the scenario. Yes, it is a part of the scenario because it is an RO district currently. So you had situations that had to go before that. So what are those things? We need to identify those things. And being a member of Mount Zion Baptist Church and being on the board of directors, we did have a meeting with the planning committee, with the builder, with the actual Tim at the time. We came down to find out what we could do with the church. What are some things that the city will allow us to do with the church? There are some things that we can still do with the organization where we only have to come before the city council and do things. Okay, so that's one thing that we already know what our laws or what things that we already did our homework. Okay, so there's things that we can do at the facility. We're trying to do the right thing for the community. These are going to be people that are going to be going to go through the whole process. You just not picking anybody out of the. I'm a veteran, and they already been through that process. It's not the hardcore, and no, it's not a halfway house. So let's get that situation straight. Yes, it will go to all regulations as far as the state or whatever it needs to be done. They will definitely do everything to try to accommodate, just not the community, okay? Community of Havre race, okay? And yes, we are a small organization, and no, we're just not trying to get our $1.5 million and let's be done with it. We are a part of the community, okay? We are a part. We do live in the community. Okay, that's a lot of members of the Mount Zion that is a part of the community and live in the community. So I just want to put that up. We're just not trying to abandon a piece of facility and go on. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do legally, and we're trying to do the right thing, what's going to be beneficial for everybody. Yes, okay, so that's first and foremost. As far as the hospital, you made a comment about it wasn't a part of the hospital. The reason why it's taking so long is because she was worried about the Affordable Care Act, and that's why it pushed on. Well, we can't do anything because we want to find out what's going to happen with the hospital. So that's why this program, it's been over a year, well over a year that we've been trying to deal with the situation, okay? If it's not going to be a veterans information, what can we do? It's other people that have come to want to purchase this facility. It's been group housing or for the women, homeless women. So is that going to be an issue for the homeless women that want to come and they want to have a facility for them to transition back in the community? Is that going to be a concern for the community if it's ladies that are trying to come in? So there's multiple things that people have come to the church to ask for us to, you know, purchase it. So the best one that we had so far, they had the money it was going to take care, was the CHEP organization. So that's where we go when it comes to that scenario. You know, you talk about other churches. So is it going to be a problem when it comes to the community if a church was to buy that facility and then the community is going to come back and say, oh, we don't have enough parking? So we're, you know, yeah, that's going to be some situations that, are we going to put the church or property owner at, you know, we can do only certain things with that property? So yes, it is a sticky situation.
Well, it seems to me, sir, that from everything I've observed so far, the city is collectively, all of the parts of the city are bending over backwards to try to
Yes.
make this thing work somehow, some way.
Yes.
And what you heard a lot about tonight was the fact that it is a complicated
That's correct.
thing, but where there's a will, there's a way. And that's essentially the position that we're taking. We're
Well,
not,
you definitely are.
you know, we're not rejecting this thing out of hand by any means.
I mean, just some comments that was made earlier that was kind of disheartening to me.
Well-
You know, when you made a comment about, you know, $1.5 million, what does that have to, if it
Well,
was $3 million or whatever?
We've got to
I
basically,
understand it, but that's not even,
yeah.
it's not an issue, me personally, I think that's not an issue. We're here to discuss, things that are taking place with the situation.
Okay, Did you have a question?
I just wanted to comment. Sir, I don't mean to sound unkind. I'm speaking on behalf of the citizens and about how people are feeling, because not everybody goes to the council meetings and listens to what the public has to say. And that's my job as a council person, to speak on behalf of that. Yes, we have been pressured into trying to get the building sold. That's worth a lot of money. But like you said, whatever, if it's a church, whatever goes in there, what's going to happen? Parking is a premium always in Havre de Grace, but located to that facility across the parking lot is associated with that church building. There is parking. It's the auxiliary parking for that building. So it's there. And we do care. We do care. We are a big town. We have the auxiliary. We have the VFW. We have many facilities that care about people. We just want to be able to provide services that when people move out of a situation, where do they go? How do we help them? We don't have a hospital here. And, you know, there's a lot that's going on. There's a lot at stake. So to be pressured into making a decision is where we're at. And that's why we want to be careful. And that's why it's going back and forth between CHEP coming to planning, CHEP coming to the council meetings, citizens coming in, us taking time to meet with all the stakeholders. It's not something that's taken lightly. And I don't mean to offend in any way, because I care. I'm a citizen here too.
Oh, I've been here. I've been in Havre de Grace all my life. And the comment that you made right there, I'm so glad that you said that. But you said about accommodating and the hospitals and bringing more people in and stuff. But we just voted on putting how many houses is going in a hospital. So where's the infrastructure? Where's the infrastructure?
Well, the housing.
I mean, I don't want to keep going on, but I just want to make that comment.
Yeah, the
And I'll
hospital
leave
is
that alone.
not an item of
I'm not,
discussion.
but I mean, she made a comment on that scenario about infrastructure-wise, and that's why I just want to bring that up, but.
Yeah, we're a little
But
tight.
I'm gonna go ahead on and thank you.
Thank you
Have a
very much
blessed
for your
one.
comments. Okay, is that it, or does anybody else have anything? Okay. Yes, sir.
My name is Richard Pearson, 616 North Adams Street. In the years I was in land development, two options. Could the parcel be rezoned? Two, could a variance be applied for that parcel of land? I mean, you can have it's RO zone right now, correct? Or could that be rezoned? Now, of course, that's got to go through a zoning commission. It's got to be publicized. Neighbors got to be told. It seems like instead of trying to rezone all of RO, why don't you rezone that one parcel? That's all I got to say. Or variance.
Thanks, sir. Thank you. Okay, if that's it for public comment. Very good. Thank you all for weighing in on this. We have a motion Where are we? We still have a motion on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I appreciate all the comments of the citizens and the advocates for Mount Zion and CHAPS, but the reason this is back to us is we're trying to define what is exactly the use that would be proposed for rezoning. And I think we'd put forward, amendments to the definition of community residential facility. Does that square with the state definitions? And I think that's basically where we are, to try to
So the
understand
motion
and
is
reconcile those.
for the chair to communicate our opinions back to the mayor and city council.
The department
Right, and city attorney, yes.
Okay, so let me call for a vote. Mr. Grono.
Yes.
Councilwoman Snegus.
Can you please restate?
The motion?
Are you,
Yes, please.
sorry, are you voting now? These
Well,
days?
Yeah.
officially, I'm still a voting member,
Okay.
but we do have, which is in discussion later, that there's going to be some changes where I am no longer a voting member, but
Oh, wait a
we
minute.
haven't approved that
I'm
yet.
sorry. Let's see. Okay.
So I just wanted to clarify before, because you're calling me to vote, can you please restate what is the motion? Yes, earlier I did,
Mm-hmm.
so I'll just stay with that. Thank you.
The answer is yes.
No. Recuse.
Recuse.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're recommending to the city attorney and the planning department's office to reconcile our recommendations and focus on our recommendations for redefinition of the community residential facility and how that recommendation squares with the state law that the city attorney identified.
Okay, Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Place.
Yes.
The chair votes yes. So I will get with you to get that exact
Okay.
wording, and I will transmit a letter to mayor and council.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just want to say thank you and everyone, because the council really does care hearing from the Planning Commission. It matters a lot. That's why it's come before you again. So thank you.
Thank you. Now,
Hey, question,
the last two items on our
Mr.
agenda.
Chair. Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
Can we see that first before it goes up? Just to
Glad to
make,
do
yeah,
that.
I'd appreciate that.
sure everybody's happy with
Thank
it.
you very much.
Yes, I'll be glad to do that. Let me get my agenda. Okay. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the historic district setbacks. And there is, in the first reading, the city council has proposed a change to the first part of that, to the whole thing. And you all have got a copy of it. And what it basically wants to do, as you can see, is it wants to align new construction with the setbacks of the existing construction that's right around it. And it gave rise to a couple of questions to me that maybe one of you can explain. Does an adjoining property mean an immediately abutting parcel, or just those two, one on the left, one on the right?
North, south, east, west.
Huh?
Yes, it would be north, south, east, west of the subject property, connected.
Well, setbacks don't work that way. Setbacks
What
is,
are you asking?
huh?
The setbacks would be from the front yard.
No, front setbacks just face the street.
Yes.
So it would be if the house is facing
The house
north.
has to face the street, whether it's a street, lane, alley, etc.
I understand, but if the house is facing north, then there would be a maximum of 2 adjoining dwellings that both face north, also face north. One on the left side, one on the right side.
He's
Could be one-
asking
could
what
be one behind it.
adjoining means. Is it the two houses on either side? He's asking what adjoining means.
Yes.
That's what all this is talking about, is those 2 immediately adjoining homes. Right?
It says along the street or within the city block.
So the underlined text is what's being added, and the one in bold
understand that
brackets is
part.
being deleted.
Yeah, I just want to get clear. Because it seems to me that up in number 1 that you would add, where it says single family and attached, you would add the words, the 1 or 2 immediately adjoining properties on the same street tangent, which means the same straight street. That's what we're talking about, right? Because I can see confusion here when we're trying to conduct hearings with the way this ordinance is written. That's all I'm saying. It's not quite as clear as it should be.
Okay, that's why we're here.
All right. So the first thing I'm asking you is, if you've got a house sitting over here to the left and a house sitting over here to the right, and they're both facing the same street, and there's a vacant lot in between those 2 houses, and somebody wants to build a house on that vacant lot, and this ordinance is saying that they can't move the house too far back or
Yeah.
too far forward. They've got to stick within a certain distance to align with those other 2 houses that are right alongside it.
Right.
That's the purpose of the ordinance, is to align the setbacks.
The streetscape, yes. Yes, correct.
Okay. And of course, it goes on to say if one side doesn't have a house on it for the rest of the block, then you only have to align with the other house. It becomes a moot point. You're not trying to align with both because the other one doesn't exist. Correct?
So the amendments are being proposed. What's underlined is being added, and what's in bold brackets is being deleted. As it currently is written, the strict application is that the subject's house that is facing the street, lane, alley, etc., would have a maximum setback of 10 feet with the Director of Planning position, but it has to be set back 5 feet if it is located within the National Register Historic District. As it's being proposed in front of you right now, we're removing the numerical value from the definition under 2059A1, and we're adding in, or B, and we're adding the language that gives it a minimum and a maximum without a numerical value. Now, if the adjacent properties, adjoining properties, say they go right up to the right-of-way line, so it'd be basically right on the sidewalk, for example, it'd be right up to it, or it could be as far back as the adjacent one, say it's 20 feet back. So then they would essentially have a 0 to 20-foot front yard setback allowed on that street or block as it's written. As it was previously written, all structures being newly proposed would have to have a 5-foot setback from the property line. Is that clear? Okay.
Yes. I just, in the main thing, I was questioning. I wasn't disagreeing with the ordinance. I was just questioning what exactly was meant by an adjoining property. And was it the next house 6 lots down, or was it the immediate house on one side and the immediate house on the other, and you didn't have to worry about the rest of the houses? That's my question.
Yeah, it would be all the lots connected or touching subject property.
Yeah,
it could be
abutting
one.
properties.
It could be 1. It could be 6. It could be 8.
Mm-hmm.
It could be along the street of that block.
Yeah.
It could be, and also just because they're say it's on a one street, not all of them will face that street. They can face the alley, they can face the lane, they can face another street, but they'll all be along, you know, because the corner properties,
Wait a minute now.
anyway.
You talking about another street?
Not all properties face the one street. You have corner lots, like, you can have it'll face like you have like Freedom Lane or Adams, and then you can have Pennington, but you can have corner lots, but they're not all necessarily set back on the same street. They're not all facing the same street, is what I'm saying.
But this ordinance is only concerned with the houses that are immediately adjacent to that house, period.
Correct.
Well, it uses the term city block also.
I mean, it's up.
That's what's getting
It's
me.
up for you to decide the scope, I believe, and to discuss what is applicable. Do you want to do along that street? The street can be all of Revolution. I mean, it could be all of Pennington. It could be the street that's specifically along that block. What street, the front, as it's set back from the front yard setback along that block? If there's a street and you have a corner lot or a lot for, I mean, Edgarano, your house faces what road are you facing off of?
Washington and Commerce.
Washington. But you would, I mean, some would argue that you would face towards Tidings Park with that Commerce.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that's one example.
Okay, what you're talking about down in Part B is all the rules that would apply to the Director of Planning when he gets to weigh in and take other things into consideration. And that's what that Part B is all about. I'm talking about all the way up in number 1 before we get to Part A, B, or C. I'm talking about before we ever even have to involve the Director of Planning. And it seems to me that A, B, and C are guidelines for the Director of Department of Planning to give additional approval. In other words, to take into consideration unusual situations, and the ordinance gives him or her permission to take the bull by the horns and make a decision. Whereas the beginning of this ordinance is the shall. You shall comply with these things. And all I'm concerned about are the shalls. And that's the only thing that I was concerned about was that paragraph under number 1. And that basically says this is the rule unless you have unusual circumstances, at which time you go to the Director of Planning and that person gets to, has more latitude to make a decision. Am I reading this wrong, everybody?
Well, I'll see if I can help clarify this a little bit more.
And so my original question was, was the adjacent setbacks of dwellings that existed, were they strictly the ones that touch that dwelling, or that lot?
So the setback
and are in the same street line. In other words, you can't count a house around the corner. You go strictly by the house on the left and the house on the right. Is what it looks like it's saying there.
Correct.
Okay, you agree with that?
Yes. I mean, it's up for, that's as it's written, it's up for you to weigh in and discuss that applicability of that.
And so I just wanted to clarify that, and anybody else?
No, I agree with your interpretation with that, yes, the setback shall be consistent, the same as the two adjoining lots.
With a slight bit of wiggle.
No, it's to be a consistent setback.
No, what I'm saying is if the two adjacent houses aren't lined up with each other, one slightly forward and one slightly back, it says what you do in a case like that you can't exceed the front, the forward setback of one, and you can't exceed the rearward setback of the other. You can wiggle in between those two with your setback, but you got to be in between those two setbacks, which makes sense, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
And if there's no properties on either side, then you default to the 15-foot setback that's in Table 1.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess my problem was in B and C. I don't really get what discretion the Director of Planning really has under B. If, after you've gone through one, then what further discretion does he have?
I think what they're trying to do, I believe, if I read this correctly, is that if you've got your new house going in between two houses that are at a certain pair of setbacks that are close to each other, and by golly, you look up and down the rest of the street and everything else is set much further back. Then he got, by mandating that this house be consistent with the two adjacent houses when everything else isn't, that he might have some latitude. Are you reading that the same way?
I guess he could, I didn't read it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they were basically the same. So the director of planning may approve a greater setback if the director of planning finds that the proposed setback is consistent with the setback for the majority of existing structures on adjacent properties along the street. So adjacent and
So now they're using
is pretty much the same.
now they're using the term adjacent in a much broader sense than what what we thought they were using it up in the first paragraph. I was trying to nail down, is adjacent, well, up above they talk about adjoining properties, and then down below they talk about adjacent properties.
Yeah, that's.
What's the difference?
Yeah, I don't know what the difference
I mean,
is.
the definition of adjacent, according to Merriam-Webster dictionary, is adjacent means close to or near something.
Okay.
You may consider the people up and down your street to be neighbors, but your next door neighbor is the person who lives in a house or apartment adjacent to
Okay.
yours. Adjacent can refer to two things that touch each other or have the same wall or border.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah. It seems to me those two
Should it
words
be
are-
the same?
Yeah, I don't get it.
Huh?
I don't get it.
I mean, I can see us trying to wrestle with this language when we got a case in front of us.
Yeah, that's would be my point. My point would be, I don't see the reason for B. I don't see the reason for C. If you have you shall, and the intent of this is to have consistent streetscape. So the directive is to line up with your adjoining properties. And I would think if you wanted to do something different, then you go to the Board of Appeals.
Yeah, well, it says that, it gives you that description.
Yeah, but then it takes, any question.
So you would leave C in?
Well, C is there C's there by default anyway.
Okay.
You don't need C, because if you don't,
You get to appeal it anyway.
if you have a problem
Yeah.
with what the code says, you get to appeal. If you think you have some hardship, you get to appeal.
Okay.
But this provides discretion to the planning director that the planning director probably doesn't need and could only cause trouble. So I would just drop B and drop C and just.
And technically, you're supposed to demonstrate a hardship whenever you go before the Board of Appeals. You're
Yeah.
supposed to demonstrate something that was not contemplated by the ordinance or something that makes it not possible for you to do what you would normally be able to do because of physical circumstances there. But
Yeah.
just the fact that you want to build a house is not a hardship.
Right. No.
And so, it seems to me that they ought to be a little more specific there. But
Yeah, this kind of goes back to our form-based zoning thing and why
yeah,
some of us objected to the way they wrote it. We have streets with very defined existing fabric. If you really wanted to do it right, you would go to each street and say, here's the setback, and go street by street. Now, that's complicated, but
see,
this is better than before.
if it was me writing this thing, I would say that, number one, you've got to align with your two adjacent or your two adjoining houses. And then if you're going to have to include what's going on with adjacent houses, that you would give it X number of feet in each direction. That you would just limit it it would be X number of feet in a straight line. We call that, in surveying, we call that a tangent. You know, all property lines are either arcs or tangents, one of the two. They're either straight or they're curved. And so, if you slightly amended the language to say that they would have to take an average of the setbacks for a certain distance in each direction, and just stop there. You'd pick a number that would maybe be like 500 feet or something, you know, something reasonable, and you wouldn't count going around the corner. You know, you're looking straight at the alignment.
Around the corner in any event.
But then again, we got to make sure that the definition of setback in our definitions is correct, because some setbacks talk about the main part of the house, and some setbacks talk about anything that's attached to the front of the house, like a porch, and even the steps of the porch is, in a lot of definitions, is part of the setback. Yeah.
Thank you. There's a lot of discussion. I didn't have a problem with any of it, and I think that in the minor cases where there is a vacant property that all of a sudden is going to get a house developed between two other ones, this gives the director of planning the latitude to make the right decision. So I did not see a problem with needing to change this in any way, shape, or form. That's my opinion.
It's a good one.
I was wondering if we should make, in this page or this section, either use adjoining or adjacent, but not both. What do you think?
I mean,
So for discussion purposes, and not to play a big what-if game, but you could have a whole streetscape of similar things, but your adjoining ones are the odd ones. You know what I'm saying? So,
Okay.
and I think that's what this is trying to speak to, is since it being an old historic town, I mean, rarely do you see more than a few houses that are lined up with a consistent setback. It's often jack-o'-lantern looking, and by removing the numerical value, which, I mean, most of these are built within that value, you open up the opportunity to promote more infill housing in an area that's already strict and challenging to develop with and conform to all aspects of applicable city code. Maybe, for example, parking. I mean, so.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what, in your mind, is the definition of a setback? What do you measure?
The distance from the property line.
Huh?
It's the distance from a property line.
What I'm saying is, at what point on that dwelling do you measure to from the property line to say this many feet?
The front facade of the house to the end of their property line.
Any structure.
What I'm saying is, what part of the house are you pulling your tape line to?
Would be the structure that's on the front of the house. Like, okay, so you're asking if they have like a porch or balcony or portico or something?
Yes.
Well, we would encourage, that's something you could speak to. I mean, so long as we are not putting them in the right of way, I think there's discretion, you have discretion to define that.
In Old Town Havre, Grace, we've got all kinds of houses that have front steps sitting over on city property.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
we've even got front porches on
we
city
deal with it, but we try to not perpetuate that.
Okay. And if the house is not sitting on city property, do you pull your tape line to the very first edge nosing of the very first step going up to the porch?
It could be.
What do you mean could be?
It could be. It's attached to the structure, then we would consider it the front.
But I'm talking about I'm saying, where do you pull the tape line to? Yeah, when you're declaring when you're trying to average two setbacks.
Like, you build the front of the house, and then you put in, then say 5 years later, you put on a front porch and deck, and then you're encroaching within the front yard setback, you would have to seek a variance, and then the Board of Appeals would have to say, this is self-imposed.
Okay. Where do we go with this?
You can call out a definition that explicitly speaks to that if you want, or you could just let the, Department of Planning and the Board of Appeals go through its route.
When is this going to be sent back to City Council for action?
We're going to have a public hearing at their next meeting on the 3rd.
Okay. All right, we need to take some kind of action on this. And I'm trying to figure out.
Do we want to remove anything? Recommend removal of any sections here? I think Chip said B and C, but
So you're happy with it?
I am too, kind of.
You're happy with it?
I am happy as well, thank you.
I can live with it. I just think it's confusing.
As noted, the National Historic District was an unplanned community, and not everything's exactly the same like the new communities that are built.
Oh,
So
sure.
we have to have some space to where we don't have a numerical value put in there to where we have to apply for variances, et cetera, and there's not a lot of space out there for building new properties, but it is good to have a code to make sure that we're, keeping in step, but not limiting people to develop and causing them to have to go through, different steps to try to get their building approved.
All I'm saying is if I've got two houses that were built 100 years ago sitting here and here, and I've got a vacant lot in between, and the two houses built 100 years ago have a nice front porch that's got a nice roof on it, but it's only 1 story high, and the rest of the house is 2.5 stories high. And the front porch has got a nice flight of steps that goes right down in front of that. And by modern definition, your setback is the very first piece of structure on your house. And that's what, you go up to Harford County and try to get a building permit, that's what they're gonna measure to, And then along you come and decide you wanna build a house in that vacant lot. And you don't want a front porch, you want one of those Federalist classic houses that's just straight up brick wall. And so you bring, this requires you to bring that house with that straight brick wall all the way up to the front of those front porch steps on those other two houses, which totally blows the appearance of the neighborhood because you got this massive house that's pulled way forward. Everybody with me on this? That's what happens. So this ordinance basically is not specific enough. It doesn't say what constitutes the front of the house. And to me, for an ordinance like this, it ought to be the main wall of the house.
Well, I think we need to take it on a case-by-case situation.
Yeah.
Because everything has been built differently.
Yeah.
And the city right-of-way back in the day was measured by the middle of the street and how a
Sure.
coach could go around into the encroaching part of the property. That was considered the right-of-way. And people built their houses and, times have changed with the streets being aligned with, the state and the city, and we just have to, kind of do it on a case-by-case, but
I
allow
think-
wiggle room.
Yeah, I just think that we need, if we're going to write an ordinance like this, we need to be practical about it, yeah.
So what made me feel okay with it is the director's decision, sorry. I thought I had it. The director's decision under A or B goes to the Board of Appeals, and that was what made me feel okay with it.
Yeah, that helps a lot.
Because that'll address the issue that you just brought up that is valid, okay? But that was my safety blanket there that, I believe that the Board of Appeals will do the right thing.
And that, there's no way we can address every situation in this.
Exactly, and I think this gives the director the latitude to make common sense decisions, then present it and have the Board of Appeals.
Bless it.
Yeah.
Except that he's not going to have any control over the scenario that I just described. That owner's going to say, I don't care what you think, Mr. Director. The ordinance says I can do this. I don't need your decision. I don't need you weighing in. I don't need to go to the Board of Appeals. I can let my two-story facade come way forward of the other houses because their porches go way forward. And then you completely messed up the streetscape. And that's my point. So I'm just giving a scenario. I can see it as plain as day because that's what I do for a living is draw house plans. And
Yeah, the director's decision is subject to appeal by the board, but it doesn't necessarily go to the board of appeals.
yeah, he gets to make the call, and then you get to appeal him.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if the commission feels like that this can fly like it's written, go ahead and call for a vote.
Well, I also feel that there is some precedent already existing in the department of how they handle what you were talking about. Do you measure to the steps or to the roof line, or what is it? Okay, and I think there's the department has.
Chip, can you pull up?
So the definition for front yard is an open space extending the full width of a lot between any part of a main building and the front lot line.
Any part of the main building.
Yes.
Of the main building or just building?
The primary dwelling, the main building, yes.
Any
like if you have a
part.
porch, we would go from the porch.
Okay. Any part of the main building.
If it's attached, correct.
So by that definition,
Steps.
the bottom nose of the bottom step of the front porch is part of that building.
I mean, there's discretion.
Okay. Well, that fits the scenario I just described then.
I mean, you could proffer, you know, if you want to go just from the facade of the building where the front door is, or if you want to have a different definition, say if you're going back 10, 15, 20 feet, that the
Yep.
you know, front structure, see porch, balcony, screen room, etc., can extend beyond X.
The whole purpose of this ordinance that's been sent to us to weigh in on is to try to preserve a proper setback look in the historic district. That's the whole purpose of this language. And what I'm saying is that that it's not doing that. It'll do it in some cases, but in other cases, it's not going to accomplish what we were trying to accomplish. It's going to be completely circumvented legally, and that's because there's no there's nothing in our ordinance that deals with the two very conflicting types of architecture. And so you'll end up with something very much like you don't want as a result, even after you've gone all the trouble to pass this ordinance. And that's something that I think needs to be addressed. But we need to move along, and I think that what I need to do is ask for a motion. And I think that your points have been well taken, all of you.
It does talk about a main building.
Hmm?
The front yard, an open space extending the full width of a lot between any part of a main building and the front lot line.
That's a
The front of the
pretty
building
wishy-washy.
cannot encroach within the front yard setback. If they propose an encroachment and say they put in a structure on the front of the house after the fact that it's built, they would have, by default, they have to go to the Board of Appeals for a variance and then show that. I mean, it's irrespective of architectural styles, whether you build modern, postmodern, you know, Victorian. The front house, the main building, has to be set back X amount of feet within as it's written, but there's discretion. Previously, it would have been 5 feet. That's where it started, and that's where you would start building the front of the house, per that style. Now there's discretion with the adjacent properties.
Okay, let's have a motion of what we want to recommend, if anything.
I would move that we approve this as written.
Okay,
Second.
Second. Any discussion on the motion? We've already had a ton of discussion.
No, yeah, I guess I feel better about B in that the director, his discretion is to approve a greater setback rather than a shorter setback. Because again, to your point, the last thing you want is something that extends in front of all the other houses. So I can see a bit of discretion there. And the only other reason I would say go to the Board of Appeals anyway is that not so much for the homeowners, but if somebody's proposing something that the public thinks is way off, then the public has a chance to see that before the Board of Appeals, instead of just the planning director. And once the building permit's issued, it'll go up and nobody will know. So, but I'm willing to go along with the rest of the group.
Okay, any other discussion? Are you participating, or are you going to recuse?
No, I am happy with the motion, and I will vote.
Okay, all right, I'll call for a vote. And let's start with Councilwoman Snagus.
I vote yes, as the motion has been presented.
As written.
As written.
Mr. Harry Miller.
Yes.
Ed Garano.
Yes.
Chip Place.
Yes.
Chair votes no. Motion passes. All right, and the last thing we got tonight, then we can go home, is sustainable landscape. And it's another proposed ordinance that's had the first reading. And there's just one big paragraph, C, that's underlined. And I think one other word down at the bottom. Website is just one word instead of two words, and that's not worth considering. And the definition of redevelopment on the second page. I think that's the only thing that's being proposed as changes, unless I'm missing something. I'd like to open discussion. What's your take on this?
I think I heard some opinions yesterday that this essentially takes power away from the Planning Commission.
Thank goodness.
Huh? And that was a citizen's opinion.
Is that right?
Yeah, it was.
I don't think that's necessarily accurate.
I don't
reflection.
agree with it either.
I'm not. I'm just telling you what the citizens said.
If I want to clarify that, it's just speaking to landscape plans for lots or disturbance under 5,000 square feet. If you're still proposing a new site plan or a new subdivision or residential or commercial building, you're required by city ordinance to provide a landscape plan.
The person was a certified planning commissioner and also a former council member, so.
Any other discussion?
Well, I'm happy that section 102-6 is referenced at all, because I never see that referenced in anything, and I never see that applied on any subdivision or site plan application that I've seen in the city. And that requires trees that are, it presumes that trees that are over 6 inches in diameter are going to be preserved, and that has never appeared in any site plan or subdivision application. And I would certainly hope to see that going forward. So I appreciate that recognition. I'll give Ms. Parsons a note here, and as you mentioned in the City Council, there's also a definition of redevelopment under the stormwater management provisions. And that's as stated here, but it goes on to say, an existing site impervious surface exceeds 40%. So just for the sake of consistency, perhaps that should be included. I'm a little concerned with the comment you mentioned, Harry, in that whether there becomes the ambiguity between what's a site plan approval and redevelopment, and even a change of use, say going from, you know, a use that's permitted to a conditional use. And shouldn't that be a site plan approval? And like going from something to a funeral home, shouldn't that require site plan approval? And then I was a little, just within the language of C, I found it a little confusing because it says a landscape plan will not be required if the project is not a redevelopment, but merely a change in use permitted under the city zoning code, provided, however, that the provisions of section 102.6 regarding removal of trees and 102.7 regarding plantings are followed. So, to my mind, that created an ambiguity that it reads like you have to follow 102.6 for removal of trees and 102.7 regarding plantings for a change in use, but not necessarily a redevelopment plan. I don't know if anybody else read it the same way. Huh?
I think that's what it's saying.
It is what it's saying. So if it's a redevelopment plan, you don't have to preserve trees. No. So why would we do that? And I don't know why you need to, if your threshold is redevelopment, then you don't even need the change of use language at all. So there's a real ambiguity there.
I think the change in use is important, as you referenced to the funeral home. It's not necessary for them to do a landscaping plan, as they were not re-landscaping, just change of use. So we do need to have that there. It's important.
Well, it doesn't meet the threshold, a change in use doesn't meet the threshold of redevelopment. So that's actually the more extreme disturbance. But the way this is written, you only have to preserve the trees for change of use, but not for redevelopment.
Which sounds backwards.
It is backwards. It's backwards.
Yeah. Because if you change use, you're really not disturbing anything.
Yes, by definition.
Whereas if you're redeveloping, you're turning dirt.
Yeah, you're turning dirt over.
I want to throw something out. I have a client that I've been working with for almost a year that this case may or may not, probably will come in front of the Planning Commission, which means I'll have to walk out of the room and recuse myself entirely from the whole premises. But this person owns a piece of property in Old Town Havre, and it's a house at one end, and it's a long, beautiful green lawn all the way down through there that looks just like a residential lawn. And it's got all the public sidewalks, it's got all the infrastructure already in place, it's got street lights in place, it's got water and sewer going up and down the street. And it just looks like it's right in the midst of a mature subdivision. And my client has asked me to subdivide this into 5 lots, one of which is the house that exists. The other 2 will be new building sites. And our plan of action is to basically try to waive as much of the site development steps as we possibly can because the site's already developed. It's completely developed. It's just sitting there, green grass. And the grass is such that you don't even have to move dirt from here to there. You can just build a house in each place because it's almost level down through there. It's just a very slight slope. And so our plan is right now is to just basically see if we can't require all the development things that are required in our ordinance be accomplished as each person buys a lot. All we do is we subdivide it, and then as they take down a lot, they have to present all the plans, such as grading and landscaping and all the other things that are required in the city ordinance at the time that they want to take out a building permit. They have to meet all the requirements at that time. Because if we try to go in there ahead of time and plant trees, they're going to cut them right down because they got to build a house where we just planted a tree. And that doesn't make sense. And the same thing for stormwater management devices that are on the property are going to have to be positioned out of the way of the house. And so we can't pre-position those either. And that's the kind of situation that I know there are several other vacant areas in Old Town that should have infill houses put in, but they are going to be faced with the same problem. And so what we're tentatively thinking of doing is just going straight to the Board of Appeals and asking for a waiver of those requirements at the site plan stage, or I'm sorry, at the subdivision stage. And requiring them written right on the plat that they have to meet those requirements at the building permit stage. Because there's nothing we intend to do to rearrange the landscape or to disturb the landscape until a house is actually breaking ground. Now, I don't see how we can write an ordinance at this stage to take into consideration something like that. It seems to me the best bet is just to go with the appeal process and just seek relief from the requirement ahead of time to do that. What do you think of that? And that plays into a little bit of our discussion here.
I'm not sure I followed it, to tell you the truth.
I didn't.
You didn't?
Sorry, no.
But
So
that's okay. I don't think it's relevant, to be honest.
Okay.
The legislation before you right now, the ordinance is focusing specifically on Chapter 102, Sustainable Landscaping. It sounds like you're alluding to made subdivisions, and more specifically, the differentiation between major and minor subdivisions and requirements thereof, which is outside the scope of this.
Well, minor subdivision is only 1 or 2 lots. I mean, it's a maximum of 2 lots.
Yes, per current city code.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Which
would put this property in these requirements. You know, because it's more than 2, you see.
Yep.
Okay. We need a recommendation here.
Yeah, so, I think the problem here that redeveloped was not defined. So this does attempt to provide that definition. So I would recommend, one, that the definition of redevelopment is made consistent with the stormwater management definition of redevelopment.
Okay.
I would recommend just deleting the clause on C that says, but merely a change in use permitted under the city zoning code. And I'm glad that, it recognizes section 1026 regarding removal of trees and 1027 regarding plantings. I would add 1028 street trees. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't ask somebody redeveloping a property to put in street trees.
What are street trees?
Where are you?
It could be in the city right away, so we have to be careful of that.
Well,
Per the sustainable, hi, hello. Per the sustainable landscaping ordinance, all street trees had to be on the private property and not within the city right away.
okay.
But there's, you know,
Well, if they can't do it, they can't do it. You know, I mean, people complain about Route 40 all the time, and the whole idea of sustainable landscape and planting is to make it look good. So, and a lot of 102 deals with planting within a parking lot. I can see, all right, you don't necessarily need to do that, but planting street trees, I think, should not be too much of an imposition.
All right, can you go back and condense that into very specific
All right, let's
language,
let's go in order of
this thing?
this thing. Okay. So starting on 102-3C, delete, starting at the end of the first line, delete, but merely a change in use permitted under the city's zoning code.
All right, just strike but merely a change in use permitted under the city's zoning code.
Right.
All right.
And then it goes on to say, provided, however, that the provisions of section 102-6 regarding removal of trees and 102-7 regarding plantings, and I would add, after plantings, section 102-8 regarding street trees are followed.
All right, and
Eric, could you read 102-6 and 102-7 to us? Well,
The language of those.
the language of those two.
okay. Okay, is that answer your question?
There's more there than I thought it was, but
basically to preserve the existing trees over 6 inches on the property, and that they're to be cut down, and the department would exercise discretion. Then there's, if they incorporate them into the overall subdivision plan, building, then basically ensure it provides protection for trees.
Yeah, I'll read it for you. 102-6, existing tree preservation and protection. And the main part is A, mature trees over 6 inches in caliper shall be maintained and preserved and incorporated into the overall planting design where feasible. These trees shall be identified on the landscape plan as existing trees to be preserved. A developer may make a request in writing to the Director of Planning to remove existing trees over 6 inches in caliper. The request must provide a justification for removal of the trees. And then it goes on to how you actually preserve the trees.
okay. So do you and then do you have 102-7 right there too?
Yep.
That's probably way more
Yeah, that gets really technical into,
Okay.
unless otherwise specified, nursery-grown plant materials shall conform with requirements listed in American Standard for Nursery
Okay,
Stock.
I got it.
Yeah.
Plantings
Yeah.
and are followed.
Okay, so that's, for section C there, that's
Yep.
that's that part of your,
So what are the ramifications of removing merely a change in uses permitted under the city zoning code? I'm not sure
Well, I was hoping to
thought
accomplish
of
what
everything.
I said earlier, that, that the way it's written, it sounds like you have to preserve trees for a change of use, but not necessarily if you're redeveloping the property.
Yeah, it's very confusing the way it's written, because if the project is not a redevelopment,
Right.
could it
Yeah.
could it be written so that a landscape plan will not be required when a what's the other change of
Yes.
use? When it's a change of use, if it was rewritten that way, would that
Yeah, or I guess you could say a landscape plan will not be required if the project is merely a change of use or is not a redevelopment, provided, however, that the provisions of section 1026 regarding removal of trees, et cetera. It's just the way it's written, it's just awkward at best. I think the point is we want to make sure that section 1026 and 1027 and 1028 regarding street trees applies both to projects that are change of use and that is not a redevelopment. If that makes sense.
so your concern is strictly with section C.
Section C, and then I would, and under the definition of redevelopment, I was suggesting that we make it consistent with section 169-3 of the stormwater management that adds, so that it would say, any construction, alteration, or improvement exceeding 5,000 square feet of land disturbance performed on sites where existing land use is commercial, industrial, institutional, or multifamily, and existing site impervious, I think it's area exceeds 40%. That would be consistent with the other ordinance.
How about if we take a different approach on this, and rather than voting on a formal motion, what if we just send up our individual recommendations for them to consider? What do you think of that approach? In which I could get you to write everything that you just said, and I would write, I don't know if I have any comments about this, but I would write whatever I want to say exactly like I want to say it and include that. We would just call these discussion and comments by the Planning Commission. What do you think of that approach? Would that work? Because we're going to have a real hard time coming to a voting agreement on
right?
language that we don't even really have in front of us. Or we haven't solidified the language.
I'm really not clear on, how this is all going to play out. What I'm concerned about is, unintended consequences here.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, when you do that, you'll be sending that up as individual members' comments and not a recommendation from this group, correct?
Right, and that's
Okay,
just
then I
the way,
agree with
that's just
that.
the way we got some stuff recently from
Yeah.
City Council,
I agree with
where we
that.
got
So
their individual comments. And
I agree too.
Yeah,
I think it'll make this a lot easier.
yeah, because we weren't going to come to an agreement with what was just being said, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so anybody that's got a comment, I need you to send me an email with your carefully written comment, and I'm going to consolidate those and send them straight over. And so we'll go without a motion on this. Okay, anything else on this subject? Any other business for the good of the commission?
Yes, thank you. This was brought up as a discussion in the first reading at our council meeting and went into public hearing for 2/18/2025. We are proposing an ordinance to receive a change in the planning commission by removing the council member who is currently serves as full member. Instead, the council president will assign the council member as role of liaison. This change aligns with our existing practice regarding council liaison for the Board of Appeals and the Historic Preservation Commission. It also will allow for us to allow for our alternate to move into a position of voting and not, just being inactively involved, but here. So
Become a regular member.
we become a regular member and have the voting rights. We have absent members, which our alternate stepped into that voting right, but giving that alternate an active member status and, basically not needing the alternate position.
So you would basically be here in an advisory capacity and in a cross-communication capacity.
Yes,
And you would still be joining in any discussion you wish.
yes.
Alternate.
Well, I wouldn't be considered an alternate.
I mean, as a council liaison.
Ex officio member, liaison. The languages are similar.
And am I understanding you correctly that the idea then would be to not only move the alternate up to your position, but to not have an alternate?
Correct.
So it'd be a 7-member commission, period?
Yes, yes.
That's exactly what I recommended when the administration called me for an opinion about 2 weeks ago.
Yes, and I
And I'm all for it.
agreed with what you said. I think that that's great that you took the time to send information to the council, and appreciate that.
Yeah,
So thank
I
you.
just think you saw all the pains I took to try to write these rules and procedures back in the fall, and the part that I had the toughest time with is how to treat the alternate and what the alternate's operating rules would be, and what the constraints and parameters and everything. And it was really tough, and I think that this just basically clears the air, and those rules and procedures definitely will have to be rewritten to reflect that we don't have an alternate, and that whole packet will be shorter.
Yes.
So good for you. I'm so glad. How do you all feel about this?
I agree.
How about
I
you,
understand it aligns the planning commission with some of the other commissions out there too.
Yes, that's correct. The Board of Appeals as well as the Historic Preservation Commission.
I always felt, as we saw a little bit tonight, I always felt that council liaison in a voting role would often run into somewhat of a conflict of interest. And this basically eliminates that problem while preserving the true reason that we have a council liaison, and that's to have direct communication.
Thank you.
Yes. Do you want me to come and speak to that at the council meeting?
That would be great. We will have a second reading at the next council meeting.
All right, just send me something on when is it?
Let's look.
March 3rd.
March 3rd, okay.
March
Let's
3rd.
Write that down. I will actually speak to her if you want me to, support.
That'd be great. Thank you. Come in under public comment. You can show up or you can sign up, whichever you choose to do.
All right, I'll take
But
care
we
of
would
it.
appreciate the support and your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other business for the planning commission?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a note, just to follow up on the Clark Road project, the 1621 Clark Road. Bridget Johnson announced a couple meetings ago that they would going in for their building permit. Though they did not have a user for the site, they were going in on spec, and they were due to come back to us again, I think, for their final renewal. So they're proceeding with building instead, and they're already starting to clear the site. And that is the site where a waiver was given to remove 24 specimen trees, despite it being, my opinion, a self-imposed hardship. So I think that's a shame, and going forward, I would hope that all our site plan applications are, and subdivision applications are very clear in identifying specimen trees, complying with 102-6, regarding the 6-inch trees. So all that is before the public in our public meetings and is not resolved in the back room without that occurring. So a little editorial comment there. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just want to, your comments are well received. I just want to clarify that I do believe that 1621 Clark Road has already received 2 extensions
Right.
for 3 years, so they will not be coming back before the planning commission. I believe their site plan approval expires in March something, so they have to begin substantial construction between now and then, and they'll be vested, and then they'll move forward accordingly.
No, they're clearing trees now.
Yeah, so they would be vested then, so they're,
Yep. No, it's done.
but I mean, there's nothing, anyway, thank you.
No, I don't expect anything to happen now. It just hopefully never happens again.
Do I hear a motion that we adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you all for sticking it out with us. This was a long meeting.